Does a hand plane surface look better than something that's been scraped or sanded? Let's find out.
Hit it!
Any hand tool user will tell you that nothing beats a hand plane surface. But is that really true? I know I sand a lot of my projects to a high grit or scrape them, and I like the results, but I do think there's some merit to it because a hand plane is actually slicing the grain. It's a nice clean cut and it leaves the pores wide open. When you sand, a lot of times you're actually abrading the surface, you're crushing it down, and that could lead to a lack of clarity. But the question is, after you apply finish, can you even tell the difference? So we're gonna do a little bit of an experiment today. We're going to scrape, plane, and sand some test boards and then finish them and see if we can even see any differences. Let's get to it. The test boards were drum sanded to 120 grit. The sanded samples were sanded by hand with 120, 180, and 220 grit. The scraped sample was hit with a few passes from a card scraper. For the planing, I'll use a freshly honed 50-degree blade in my low-angle jack plane. And before we apply the finish, let's take a look at these results here. The hand plane surface is definitely better than the sanded surface, just in terms of depth, clarity. It just looks really good. The question is, what's going to happen after we apply finish? But you can see why hand tool users say that this surface is superior, because it certainly does look better. The scraped surface versus the sanded one over here, I don't see as much of a difference between the two. I do see some lines in here from the scraping, which can happen, and that's why I always hit my scraped surfaces with a little bit of sandpaper before I actually apply finish. But the difference isn't all that substantial here. All right, so let's apply some finish and see what happens. The finish I'm using here is Osmo Polix, an oil-based product. Each board gets a light coat on both sides. After the board's cured, I added a couple of coats of lacquer to one side, just to see if a thicker film finish affects the appearance. First, let's take a look at the plain versus sanded, and this is just the oil side. And I do see a difference here. It's not dramatic, but it's definitely there. The darker spots are just darker on the plain board. They're a little bit lighter, and it gives a little bit more of a consistent look to the sanded surface. So this could come down to personal preference. Maybe you do want to tone down some of that contrast, but for sure, the hand plane surface definitely has darker stripes on it. Let's flip it over and take a look at the lacquered side, oil and then lacquer. And here I see another contrast as well. It just looks like this has more clarity. The lights are lighter, the darks are darker. Right? So if you're going for contrast, it definitely seems like this hand plane surface looks better. Not that this looks bad, but the sanded surface is a little bit more muted and a little bit less of a high contrast. Now let's look at the scraped versus the sanded, and this is the oiled side. I don't really see as much of a contrast and difference between these two. Generally speaking, the lights are about the same, the darks are about the same. The only exception is this area here does look a little bit darker than this, but I think that's probably more of a composition difference because these were sliced from the same board, and this just may be, a little bit more darker material there. But overall, I don't see that much of a contrast. So let's flip it over to the lacquered side. And once again, they both look pretty equal to my eyes. They both look great though. This is amazing material. And just for the sake of good experimentation, I took the original sanded board and gave it the planing treatment. So here's a side-by-side of the same board, sanded on the left and planed on the right. Once again, the plain board shows more contrast. Now, of course, a little experiment like this is not perfect, and it's left to interpretation. You may look at those boards and see something different, and your conclusion may be different, but I just want to give you some data points that you could use for yourself and make a decision for what's right in your shop. Now, if I'm to draw a conclusion from this, I've got to say, the hand tool users are right. This surface is better, and especially if we're talking about a highly figured wood, I think it's totally worth it to tune up a hand plane and make those final passes with the hand plane. If you can't and you have to sand, obviously it still looks good, that's absolutely beautiful, but if you want the most contrast possible, you gotta use a blade and not sandpaper. And a scraper is good, but I still don't think that the scraper is producing nearly as much contrast as we see with the hand plane, and that could be circumstantial. These two pieces, my sample pieces, were very different. The one I used for scraping versus versus the hand plane, so that could be a factor as well. But scraping and hand planes have another benefit. They're faster and they don't use as much sandpaper or create as much dust as sanding. So when I sanded those pieces, I had to go from 120 to 180 to 220, and some people want to go to 320. That's a lot of work, a lot of paper, and a lot of dust. I could do the same thing and get better results with about 4 or 5 passes of a hand plane. So this is where the whole hybrid woodworking thing comes in, and I try to hammer it home in my book, that you really just want to use these hand tools to finesse, or at least I want to use these hand tools just to finesse. I don't want to use it for milling, but if I can get better results, save myself time and money, totally going to use a hand plane for it. All right, so hopefully this helps you in your woodworking journey and gives you some information that you could use in your shop. Thanks for watching.